Thanks for tuning in. This is wow, not a high level of production,
Casual.
but we've got some great people here. We basically we wanted to come together. I know it's been a while since we've been here on Citystate. This is going to be sort of a special offshoot series as we investigate, and just not really investigate. It's probably a harsh word. But really just think about what is going on with this whole thing that you may have heard about a little bit in the news in the last few weeks as these public meetings have been happening. But basically, there's this thing called the Merger Comprehensive Review Commission that's been going on. This is coming out of some legislation from, I guess last year, 2022, House Bill 314. And it looks like some folks, from the Kentucky General Assembly want to think about, is Louisville, Jefferson counties merged city government and all of the relationships that we have with these smaller cities out there. They want to re-examine this. They want to think about, do changes need to happen? Is everybody getting a fair deal? And they set up this commission to sort of look at this. But in the face of what we're seeing in this commission, I think we probably have just as many, if not way more questions than I think the commission even has about these things, it's seeming like. But I wanted to welcome a couple of great folks that have really been keeping a close eye on this in our community. We've got Sarah Fisher. She's been to some of these meetings. Michael Schnerl is with us. Both of you guys have been to these meetings. But basically, just to get to know everybody, I just wanted to, hand it over to you guys, let you start, introduce yourselves, and just talk a little bit about why you're here, wanting to talk about this and think about this today. And Sarah, if it's cool, we could start with you.
Sure. So I'm Sarah, and I found out about the public meetings recently. I remember a couple articles coming out in early 2022 about this bill passing, and then heard nothing until a couple weeks ago when they started doing public meetings. Realized this will have drastic implications for taxes and allocation, basically the funding of the city and how it's funded. And there really has not been any information about it out there. And it's flown under the radar. And I've just been trying to figure out what is going on.
Excellent. Totally. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, so Michael, I grew up here in Louisville, way outside the urban service district. I live within it now, but I've actually been tracking this probably since back to February, when the council would hold the Comprehensive Review Commission meetings there, and you could watch the recordings, and now they have that posted on their website. So I was following back then, but what struck me with those initial first, I don't know, 5 or 6 meetings, some were canceled, was just how I think they didn't know how to move forward with it. I think there was a lot of just back and forth about how do we get started. Here's this mandate from the state. They're not sure what to do. After a few months, those meetings got a little more interesting, and they started having people present that they had asked to gather data and show some results. So I've been following it, but these public meetings that have been coming up recently to me are very interesting too, because the first 3 there was almost nobody in attendance, and then the last 3 there's been more, and we've got 1 more coming up this coming Monday. But these meetings, it's interesting. The sentiments, we'll get into that, but the bill itself to me is just it's such a powerfully written bill that this commission that is looking at it, these 15 people, can recommend that the state make internal to metro or statutory, state level changes to how the mayor operates, to how the Louisville interacts with other governments, to tax powers, funding, distribution of services from the government, from the city, and then even the relationship between Louisville metro government and all the suburban cities. So it's like it has this ability to recommend to the state these things. And so how it operates and what that report is really important to me. So that's what I'm trying to make sure, follow along and make sure they're doing a good job to the best of their ability.
Totally. And I mean, just as a little tiny bit of background, I mean, we merged in 2003, 2003. It's been about 20 years of merger. It's the relationship was already complicated between the county, the small cities, and Louisville before merger. A merger arguably made it more complicated. In some people's eyes, I think made it less complicated and made it a better scenario. And I think that's what we'd really like to talk about. I'm not sure how many episodes this will do, but we just wanted to explore not only this review commission, but just think about the impact of merger in its own right. I think there was a sentiment, about 20, 25, years ago that regional governance was a good thing, that it made sense that there was going to be these efficiencies, that there could be better services, that we could represent as a larger entity and perhaps get bigger federal grants because of our population size. But I think like one of my concerns and I think interests in looking at all of this is that I don't know that we're in a space anymore politically across these very different kinds of places to make political decisions together in a way that's in good faith and in a way that makes sense for all of us. I just think, we've got people with very different competing kinds of views about what, they want to spend their money on or don't want to spend their money on, what they think a neighborhood should look like, what they think roads should be like, their relationship with the police. I think we have very different things. And I don't know that we can come together and make decisions as a regional entity in a way that serves all of us well. And an example I always come back to is that, we had thousands of people that wanted to close many roadways in one of our great urban parks here in Louisville. And that was a decision that everybody in town was pretty on board with. We weren't going to close every road, but we were going to stop Cherokee Park from being a cut through to save 2 minutes off people's commute time. And we weren't able and allowed to make that decision because folks from out in the county thought that was a bad idea to limit the use of cars in an urban park. This is just sort of a small little thing, but I think this is indicative of the kinds of problems that we find ourselves further in and are going to find more of as these sort of as this political polarization continues to happen. And really, so, I mean, as much as we want to talk about what's going on with this merger review commission, I think just also talking to people about, what they see and feel and think and hear about merger is going to be a part of this. And this comes up in all of these meetings. And I think, today in this first episode, we just wanted to sort of explore what some of the questions are that we even have, who might we want to talk to about some of these things. But I mean, I think first of all, you all have actually been to these meetings in person and I have not. And I just wanted to see as you attended these meetings, what kinds of questions were you hearing from attendees and what kinds of questions was this making you have? And I think, Sarah, maybe we could start with you.
Well, first of all, there wasn't a whole lot of questions. Most questions, especially, I know the meeting we attended, questions asked by people for clarification, as well as about effects to the urban service district were very much shut down. They were told that this isn't the forum for questions, although this is the only public comment forum. So if this isn't the forum for questions, then they don't expect questions or don't invite questions. And there seems to be a misunderstanding of really what services are provided in the urban service district. I don't understand. People see a lot of comments from people outside of it seem to think this is some kind of well-run nirvana where everyone has flawless services that we don't pay for. That's not true. We obviously pay for them, and they work sometimes, not all the time, and I don't really understand. It seems like people who are making these comments have never really driven or been to the urban service districts, because it's clear that one of the main comments is always trash pickup. Yeah. There is trash everywhere, and that's the thing that really sticks out to me that has changed in the urban service districts post-merger. Is the amount of funding for any type of litter trash pickup has been decreased. So I didn't vote in the merger. I was far too young But that something that always sticks out in my mind that I remember my mother saying, because I grew up in the suburbs, but my mother worked downtown, and she would say whenever they had out of town visitors, they would always comment about how clean the city was, how nice it was, how they didn't see any litter, and it was just a nice, like it was spotless. And my mother, if she says something's clean, it is clean. That woman can spot a speck of dust in the wildest places. So the fact that she mentioned that and that people would comment, and that's just, she mentioned it enough where it stuck in my 8-year-old mind. I don't think anyone would ever come to the city or the urban service districts and describe it as clean.
Yeah, totally. And just a little bit of zooming out for folks, like, so if folks aren't aware, like the urban service district basically means the old city. That's a little bit, I mean, it's basically the old city, and we pay a lot more taxes in the urban service district to get things like trash pickup, yard waste, lawn waste pickup, recycling. And I think the amount—
it's the highest tax rate of all Jefferson County.
And everybody outside of the urban services district, that it's not a part of a small city, they pay, I think, roughly like a third. But they're getting stuff like police, public works, beautiful regional libraries. They're paying into systems that they use in terms of social services. But anyway, Michael, in terms of your visits to these meetings, what were some of the things you were hearing, and what were some of the questions that were coming up for you?
Yeah, and before I say that, you know, the tax rate question is one that did come up a lot, or people have assumptions about, and I think it's because it's a little complicated.
It is very complicated.
There's property taxes, there's occupational license taxes, but
insurance premium taxes.
Yeah, insurance premium taxes, which I think are a big deal and are probably the least understood. But the property tax rate for the urban service district is higher than everywhere else. Shively comes in second. So, you know, urban service is paying more. But yeah, so I went to only the Atherton meeting, which of course is in the Highlands, and I watched all the other meetings in length. And it was interesting to me, like for the meetings that were well participated in, which were like Valley and Atherton and the one between those two, you know, people had the same complaints in a way. They basically, almost everyone said merger was a mistake and it has not made things better, and for one reason or another. So either they feel like they're being overtaxed and not getting enough services. That was a common complaint outside of, I think, the urban service district. And then even within, you know, at the Atherton meeting, I felt like people were saying that yes, they're getting taxed. Yes, we probably should be getting taxed because we want government services. We understand the value of government services, but the return on that is not what it should be because it's being spread too thin. So a lot of people are unhappy. Also, the other common sentiment was that the meetings were not very well publicized. You know, I think we saw one image of a flyer, and that's all that went out. And
yeah,
you know, I don't think they made much effort to share it on Nextdoor or social media or get it in front of the press. So then there was no press about the meeting. So that was another sentiment, was that across the board was like, hey, I just found out about this. I'm just showing up tonight.
It's a lot of information, to go through. Like I've been trying to catch up on the past meetings and the videos, and it's hours. It's a lot of information. And one of the going back to your point on taxes, so one of the big reasons it is spread so thin is, one, we really don't have a whole lot of control on how and what we tax. Like we can't really do new tax schemes, like we can't have a land value tax in the urban service districts without state permission. But the commission said that so Louisville gets back 50 cents on every dollar it sends to Frankfurt, as well as we are extremely disadvantaged by the state road fund. So I don't know if anyone here can explain it a little better, but yeah, we all pay gas tax, and Louisville overall pays the most because we have the most people, the most cars, and we get back I think 12% of the fund, where normally I think they said we should be getting 16 or 18% back of our population. due to our population, but the way it's designed, it really favors rural communities. And so we really are like, cities are always the economic engine of the state, but we are very disadvantaged in that. And so it's Lexington. Like a lot of comparison data they found really looked at like our service, like Louisville and Lexington services are much below the spending of our peer cities. And really the conclusion they was that because of lack of state funding, like we're not getting enough money back that we send to the state.
Yeah. There's that dynamic. And then what you're saying about like, we have no control over how we tax really, you know, is like, I mean, the last mayor, I mean, they spent so much time trying to get this local option sales tax thing, like going through, and that wasn't even like having the local option sales tax. It was about us having the right to choose that we get to have a local option sales tax, and we couldn't even we don't even get that ability from Frankfurt to be able to make choices about whether or not we want to raise more money on our own, which is
and this isn't even the mayor, the Metro Council making that decision on its own. That would all have to go to a vote for the community. So it's not like that would pass without community input. It's just giving us the ability.
Your point about the sort of both of your all's points about kind of the disorganization of this, back to the merger review commission itself. I mean, I think coming out of some of the complaints that folks like you two specifically have made, like on social media, you know, it's like I've seen their website evolve in the last 2 weeks as people have been like, who's even on this commission? Local journalists didn't have the list of who was on this commission, like until
it wasn't published.
It's funny to see like the little like kind of their webpage grow, and now they've got a lot of stuff up here. But I think something that was a big thing for a lot of people, and I think probably came up the most from what I understand in this in the Atherton meeting last week, is that the analyses in the data that they're including here don't seem to be to the level of analysis to get to the complexity of the situation here. And I think that there were some comments around where is the data, you know, sort of a thing. Where's the raw data? Where is the data pulling apart these different taxes? Because I'm not seeing that in any of these PowerPoints, like the one you're mentioning, Sarah, about the one with the line graphs that shows that Jefferson County is a lower tax rate than these other peer cities. That line for Jefferson County is not pulling apart the various tax situations from the urban service district, the suburbs, the unincorporated areas of the merged area. It's just putting it all in one line. And that's not, I think, what we needed to see all that stuff separated out in a pretty sophisticated and complex way. And this commission hasn't done that to my knowledge, and seemingly is not going to do that. And I think, Michael, I think you had some thoughts about that, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I actually submitted the public comment to them and got a bit of a response, but yeah, a lot of the charts you see in the PDF that they published, and that's what I think the PDFs themselves, the pictures of the charts are what they are considering the data.
The data.
But as we know, yeah, it's not the raw data that went into making up what those numbers were. A lot of times those charts have a sum of a bunch of different things, and we'd like to know as the public what was their methodology for coming up with that. But even in the end result, there's still, even if they don't share the raw data, they could still do a better analysis and a better charts and graphs. And so yeah, like something that they mentioned in pretty much every meeting, the chair or the co-chairs have mentioned this, is that something like the unincorporated areas or the suburban cities generate far more revenue than the urban service district.
That's a claim. That's a claim.
That's a claim, and then they have charts that show it. So they'll even quote, like one of the charts I'm looking at is occupational tax receipts from unincorporated areas make up, say, 37% of all the tax, whereas inside the urban service district it's at 20. So they may say it's almost double. And that's what they're presenting as the final analysis and the conclusion. But my point, I had a few points at the meeting and then online, is that you're just summing up a huge area compared to a small area. And of course, when you do analysis, that's just not how you need to do. You need to think about the individual voters, the residents of the place, like take into per capita analysis. And I've done some of the same per capita analysis on the same numbers from the same source that they happen to have, which happens to be on the open data website. And when you do that, the numbers flip. So it's like all of a sudden the urban service district is doing twice as much per capita as all the unincorporated areas. And that's just something they're not really looking at or talking about.
Yeah.
And then my other comment related to that was around land use. So if you look at acreage, divide it by number of acres, it's even more extreme. I mean, the land use in the urban service district and the tax revenue generated per acre per square mile is way more. It's sometimes like 25 times, 100 times more, depending on the zip code, more than the unincorporated areas. And that's something they're just not showing in any of their reports.
They seem to be very much pushing a certain narrative, and they've been pushing that from the beginning. There's even some comments from some representatives about wanting the data. Representative Nema said, what exactly did he say? He wants to see the data before it's analyzed, so it could be possible for them to shape the information and ask questions that they think are important to the people we're representing. So, and this was from the February meeting. So this, like from the very start, certain people have narratives they're pushing, and so that's why it's so important to have like the raw, unanalyzed data, so we can look at it and really see, because raw data are straight numbers, but it can't be manipulated. But interpretations of that data, you can make that data do anything you want. You can exclude things, you can look at it in different ways. So it's very
a great example that there is they have a capital projects and expenditures slide, and they're looking at zip codes. And they're looking at basically how much money is being spent in different zip codes from this data that they've gotten from something called the Metro Council Staff Database, which I'm not really sure what that is. So we don't really even know the data source. And then they're summing this up, but then they have maybe like 6 different caveats of how they've summed it. Like it's a partial measure. It's over 11 fiscal years. It includes like parks and libraries, but it doesn't include paving. Doesn't include federal projects.
It's incomplete.
Fire and EMS, so they're leaving out huge chunks of where this money and the expenses of services go, but yet they're presenting this chart and really showcasing. They actually highlight it that the 40202 and 40223 zip codes get the lion's share.
And they're also overlooking major issues that have been really caused by a strain on our infrastructure because of like urban sprawl. So I think it is 40204 what was it, Broadway, where the sewer collapsed because our old sewers they're having trouble handling the strain of all these outerlying developments. These are Civil War era sewers. And that was an expensive collapse, and to my knowledge that had to be locally funded for a repair in 40204.
So sorry to interrupt. Take this all the way to the Witch's Hat in Cherokee Park coming down, right? You're talking about a park system with probably being very conservative, something like over 100 million of deferred maintenance. And this is because it doesn't make sense to maintain all this stuff at the way we're maintaining it and the way the money's coming in. I mean, what I'm seeing from these videos is that a lot of these folks out in the suburbs that are mad about merger, what they're really mad about is they're mad about it being really expensive to live in the suburbs and expect good services is what they're really mad about. And I'm sorry, but like, I don't think that this needs to be understood that when you live far away from everything and very low density settlements, it's going to be expensive because everything's longer to drive to. There's no economies of scale of being nearby. There's no synergy. It's just like, you got to, all those trucks got to drive further and burn more gas, which is terrible for the environment. And you need to maintain the roads for the trucks to burn more gas to get out there to your neck of the woods. The cops takes them longer, emergency services, whatever, so it's just what I'm seeing is people not wanting to come to grips with it's expensive to live in the suburbs.
Yeah. And I think that Sarah, you brought up the tax, gas tax as an example. And actually, I don't know, they haven't talked about that in particular at all. But that's like a piece of how roads are funded. Even in Kentucky, I think it's like 36% of roads are funded with a gas tax, and the rest are just out of the general pocket of taxpayers. But there's an institute, the Sustainable Property Institute, that's done some research on this. You can find online, and I put this in my public comment too, where they look at the cost of services in an urban area versus just the suburban area, not even rural. And the conclusions they reach are things like roads cost 10 times as much per person in a suburban area. Sidewalks are 7 times as much. Sewer and water are quadruple. Buses and police, fire, libraries are twice as much. So like that's just like you said in your comment, Sarah, economies of scale there, and ability to get, when you have the density per person, it's going to be a lot cheaper. So I think that to me is a sentiment that people are sort of starting to understand. They understand the outcome is that the services are worse across the whole county since merger. And I think that's because the cost per person has gone up, where the tax rate has not gone up. So we're spending more money per person as we go to suburban and rural, but we have not raised taxes.
Instead of looking at that, this commission wants to look at that broken chart that you were just referencing that shows this completely distorted look at expenditures by zip codes and say, well, then downtown's getting all the money. And that's not what's happening. But, back to Sarah's point about, this sort of information being arranged, creatively. I mean, that's what they've made here. This chart, you've got people that are calling themselves legitimate university professors that have made a chart with caveats and asterisks all over it that anybody that knows anything about urban services can see is missing all kinds of things. Anybody that knows anything about all the different taxes we pay knows is missing all kinds of inputs in this chart. Meanwhile, this chart's done for this commission's view, and this is the chart that's going to inform their report, which, as Michael stated way earlier, could completely change the shape of the governance of the city. So this is the kind of stuff that none of us here on this call were seeing the media talking about. And this is the reason why, we wanted to come together and start talking about these things. I mean, other questions that I think, aside from the data stuff, which I think we're going to tackle a lot more in the next one, a great question I think both of you can speak to, because you may have heard a bit about this in the meetings, but it looks like Justin Hicks was at one of these meetings from WFPL, and he was sort of live tweeting here, and somebody at the meeting was like, what's the purpose of this commission? To undo merger or to fix the problems it created? And Neem says, quickly, apparently, that no, it's about fixing the problems. So apparently there's this idea that unmerging or not being merged is off the table. Have you guys heard this in these meetings?
Very much so.
We're not unmerging.
Yeah, that's not, yeah. Because that's no one, I think, I have not heard a glowing review from anyone in the urban service districts, outside the Watterson, outside the Gene Snyder. Everyone is unhappy with how merger is going and the services that are provided, which simply because there's not enough money to provide adequate services.
Yeah, and so I think I've heard them say that almost every meeting too, especially Nemus, that unmerger, demerger, whatever, annexation is off the table. But that's an open question to me for them, is why is it off the table? Because if you look at House Bill 314 and the language there, it does seem like they have the ability to recommend that. They can recommend, I'm looking at it right now, the distribution of services, the future of relations between the city and the suburban cities and the service districts in the county. So, so like, I feel like they could make that recommendation. I don't know why that is off the table, unless they just decided as a commission it was off the table.
Yeah. That's another thing we'd like to, I think, explore more. And also just, I think, looking a little bit about the nature of like, what was good about merger? Did it help things? I mean, personally, I've always been a guy that's like, I want us to get back to make, to a small compact city that can make decisions for itself. But I think other people, are more like, well, merger helped us raise money to do bigger things. And I think a part of that, there was this this really interesting op-ed that apparently all members of last year's Louisville Metro Council signed on to at the bottom of the letter. I'm not sure who drafted it, but it was an op-ed in the Courier Journal, March 15th, 2022. Metro City Council, the future of Louisville shouldn't be decided by people who don't live here. And they're talking about sort of why, in their mind, I think merger was a good thing for them. And then a big thing that they're worried about, it looks like, is our taxes, primarily this insurance premium tax, where I guess, you know, we would lose up to, gosh, $50 million of insurance premium taxes. And what would that mean for all of these agencies like LMPD or like libraries or like Public Works? I mean, but I think you know, you look at this and you think about these things. I mean, you can just sort of do like a back of the envelope calculation, like police before merger, like adjusting for inflation, cost us about $110 million in today dollars. Well, with merger, it costs us $210 million. So there's an extra $100 million there to cover the rest of the county with police, that apparently all these people are not happy with LMPD's service out in the county. I bet that's a different story when LMPD shows up and helps them out, for the folks that have experienced that. But I guess people that haven't needed police services don't think that they need LMPD. But I mean, it's $100 million potentially. I mean, it's a little messy, but there's a lot of money going out from this city out into the county. And I think that's the kind of analyses and the kind of conversations we'd like to hear more about, because I think the review commission's definitely covering the other side of how they're getting a raw deal.
It's also it's very for me upsetting on a personal level, because this is merger was supposed to bring everyone together under one scheme, and obviously that didn't happen. And something like this, it's just creating more divisions. And it's a common starving the city to feed the suburbs mentality, which is, I mean, that's a great term, but if we do that, we're also long-term going to starve the suburbs, because the city is the economic engine and the employment center. So we're all ultimately going to wither away if we allowed the city to degrade, this is just a bad deal, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, to your point, Pat, like, Louisville is to Kentucky what the urban service district is to the county, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that. And I don't think this commission is even running the numbers in a way that show that. Like, they're running it in a way that tries to show the opposite.
Yeah, they're trying to explain and get occupational tax and send it to where people live and not where they are employed, which to me is,
you know, they do that on purpose, and they should look at it both ways. Like,
totally.
Both ways.
To them, it's like, it isn't even like their analysis really isn't needed. To them, they just know, like, inherently that they're getting a raw deal, and like they know that, you know, and like, and then they really don't need all these, you know, professors that they've paid tens of thousands of dollars to with these incomplete analysis to really tell them that, because they know in their hearts that they're getting a raw deal. But I mean, the objective reality is that they are not. And in many ways, this city is kind of propping up their luxurious, low density suburban lifestyle. And I know that that's going to really upset a lot of people to hear that, but that's what's going on. We've been having this sprawl, low density party for decades of people living kind of beyond the environment and their own means and taking more resources than they need, which is also, you know, made them less together in communities, made them more isolated, further apart. I don't know. People have their own identities and politics, and if they want to live out in the suburbs, that's fine. But please don't try to shove down my throat that, you know, like, you're not getting enough, or that you should get more for the little that you're already paying. But I would love to hear other perspectives on this. And I think as a part of that, we'd like to have folks on and interview them. I know we've had some ideas. I mean, Mayor Jerry Abramson, a former mayor that most people that are listening to this have heard of, he gave a really interesting presentation about the legacy of merger at the Filson Historical Society a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to get that audio so we can play a little bit of it in a future episode. I would love for him to come on if he would, but in that meeting, he did not want to talk about this. He didn't want to talk about this. He mumbled something about partisanship and then went on to tell this great story about how they tried to buy LG&E back in the day. But what other folks would you guys like to hear or have on to explain or give their point of view or what have you?
I mean,
I-
someone that came to mind right before this was the people from my old Kentucky podcast, because I feel like it's right up their alley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to talk to the people doing this analysis and to have them explain not just where they've gotten their data, but just their methodology, because that is necessary for quality and control to present the raw data, so the numbers, the uninterpreted data, and explain the methodology they have used. I think Representative Fleming even said in one of the first meetings that it is vital for quality and control purposes to have that out there, so the public can actually see the points. We can have dual controls, and the public can validate, and they want that, so we can be assured and have trust in that data and their conclusions. And I don't think that we do.
Yeah.
Because they haven't provided that narrative, and that wanting the public to have confidence in it has changed. And now it's this is a conclusion, you don't need to see it. This is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think that, like, I'd love to have the researchers on as well, but I would love to invite anyone who's on the commission, the 15
Yes.
people. Three of them are council people for the city. So
That's
any
what I
of
was
them.
going to say. Like, I would love to hear from Councilperson Ja'Cory Arthur. Would love to hear from Councilperson my boy Anthony Piagentini. Would love to hear from Cindy Fowler on this. I think she would have some great things to say. Also, there's the mayor appointed Marianne Butler, former D15 councilperson. Would love to see what these folks think. When I haven't seen all of these folks. Well, I've seen Cindy and Marianne at the videos of these meetings. I would love to understand why people are coming, why they're not coming, what they're saying, what their general vibe is, But cool. Well, this has been really good. I don't think I even got to, half of this. But I think we've had a good conversation and set this up well. So I really appreciate both of you coming on. Sarah, thank you. Michael, thank you. Hopefully we're all back on the next one. Maybe we'll have other people with us. We're not sure what we're doing yet. We don't get paid. We're just regular people trying to answer questions that most, especially bizarrely, Metro Democrats don't really seem interested in answering. Yeah, like maybe we'll talk more. Michael, you're doing a ton of work on this data. Let's get into that in the next episode. How about that?
Yeah, data's fine. We can set it up based on our speakers as well. Whoever wants to come and be part of the conversation, we can sort of tailor it to them.
Killer. All right. Well, thank you all, and look forward to talking more with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Mhm.